Hi everyone, welcome back to Cooking with Insentra. Today I have with me in the kitchen Safi Obeidullah, Field CTO for Citrix. And if you're clever and if you've watched all of our videos, you'll notice that as I'm doing Cooking with Insentra sessions, the people I cook with tend to get taller. It's not that I'm getting any shorter. Safi, welcome mate.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much
have
for
you
having
with us
me.
in the kitchen. Today it's raspberry and coconut muffins.
Yum.
Think
Can't
you're
wait.
down for that?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So while we're talking about raspberry and coconut muffins, which is a whole bunch of coconut milk and the things that I'm just going to mix in here, tell me, like, obviously Citrix over the past 12 to 24 months has become even more relevant in society, in everything we're doing with people working at home, etc. What have you guys found out there? How's it been for you? What's been the impacts of the business and what's going on?
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting journey. I mean, if you think about Citrix, we've been around now for over 30 years. And from the outset of the company, we've always had this vision that people should be able to work from anywhere, that work is not a place that you go, it's a thing that you do. And so we have been on that mission for quite some time. I guess if you think about some of the barriers that have been there historically for remote work, it's been that notion of presenteeism or trust that's really held people back.
Can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that presenteeism. I read an article on that only yesterday.
Yeah,
I think it was in one of the leading newspapers.
Yeah. Presenteeism, I guess, is that notion that you need to be seen to be thought of as being productive. You know, that notion that I need to be in the office and I need to look busy, and if I can, as a leader, if I can see my people busy, then I know they're actually doing work. And I think there's that thought has always been that if I can't see my people and they're at home, then how do I know they're actually working? Yep. How do I trust that they're not sitting there in front of the TV? And so if you think back to the last few decades, remote work or remote access has always been around. You know, people have always had that, but it's been by exception. You know, only in an emergency or you need to catch up. It's not the norm. And so what this work from home experiment that we all needed to go into, it's really forced that hand. And we've had to do it because there was no other choice. We were in lockdown, we all had to work from home, and we found that, you know what, people can be trusted. Work can still continue. And I think that's been the real big wake-up call, and in some ways I feel that it's really pushed the concept of work forward almost a decade. Like we've seen the thinking around what work is, how to do work, where work can get done has progressed a lot to the point now where you've got companies around the world saying remote working is going to be a permanent aspect of our lives going forward. Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, you know, what I might do is share with everyone what's going into this. We're going to put the ingredients down, and you know, it'll be in the comment section or in the footnote section of the video. But I will share with you that this is actually a very healthy set of muffins here. We've got coconut milk that I've put in, some maple syrup, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, some coconut oil. Nice. Whisk that up, and now I'm going to put in some of the dry ingredients, which is really just some buckwheat flour, some desiccated coconut. What else are we going to put in here? Some almond meal.
Yep.
And then I'm going to get you to fill up these little trays that we've got.
You've given me the sticky job.
Absolutely. I've given you the one that's more difficult. I'm not silly. So interesting that you talk about people, you know, and the future. We did a survey recently in Insentra, and we've had our offices closed for over a year now. And it's not because we've been so concerned about the office itself, but more about the transport to the office. And most people take public transport, and they're, you know, people who aren't comfortable to come in. And we did a survey, and over 50% of our crew don't want to come back at all. No, and it's only the Sydney office that we have where we've actually had a physical presence. Our UK and US, Philippines, etc., they've all been remote offices.
Yep.
And the 50% that do want to come back only want to come back 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah, that's right.
And to your point around this presenteeism, I think people are now looking at teams and saying, well, what colour is their, you know, are they green? Are they red for being busy? Are they...
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the downsides of what's happening. I mean, everyone's talking about how productive everyone is and all that, and my question is always, well, at what cost? And it's this digital presenteeism that's starting to come in where you need to feel the need to be online or be perceived as online.
To be working
and
all
so
the time.
people are over-rotating on, I need to respond to an email quickly, or I need to make sure I make all those meetings. So that's where this whole digital fatigue is really coming into it, where while we're being productive and business seems to be going, people are getting burnt out.
They are.
From back-to-back Zoom meetings. We don't have those natural segues between meetings where we're jumping in a cab and going to see a customer, or walking from one side of the office to the other to a meeting room and meet someone on the way. All those natural breaks are gone. And we're just doing back-to-back meetings. The commuting times are replaced with more meeting times.
Yep.
And so, sure, we're being productive, but we're genuinely burning ourselves out. So, for organisations everywhere, I think we need to be mindful that as great as remote work is, it's not perfect right now, and we need to really think about the human factor in it and make sure we help people be comfortable and healthy and their well-being is looked after, and really find that balance.
And I think that's a really interesting point. We're now starting, at Insentra, we've always been very, very focused on our crew. And, that's been exhibited by our positions in the Great Places to Work of 8th and 4th, 2nd, 3rd, 2nd in Australia's Great Places to Work. And it's really been about how do we create that great environment for them to work in, where they feel loved, where they feel like they're doing things with people who love them. But my perspective on that has now shifted a little bit, where it's less about just where they're working and what they're doing and the environment they're working, but more about the whole person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And mental health, so their mental health, their physical health, and their health at work.
That's right.
And it's a real transition that we're making, and it's something that we're growing in over the recent 12 months. And I think your point is valid, that it's very hard for people to create that distinction between work and home, because often they're in the same location.
That's right.
And then further to that, actually having the discipline to create those breaks. And diaries, you're right, are just like back to back.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and different organisations are approaching it in different ways. I know some of the people I've been talking to, they're trying to purposefully create those breaks where, one company has made a policy of no email after 7 p.m. Just no email. Because if you send an email, there's an expectation, especially if it's a manager or a leader, that I better respond and I'll log back in and do it. Whereas if it's truly urgent, you're going to pick up the call. Another company instituted a policy of digital bingo, where throughout the week they had a whole bunch of actions and activities, and staff had to perform them. And they were stuff like go for a run, make some muffins, or just some natural non-work related activities, just to give people that sense of break.
I love that idea.
It's really cool things that people are doing.
I love that digital bingo. So let's make sure that these things every week you tick off. You've had your walks every day.
Exactly.
To encourage people to actually have those behaviours.
I think the best thing though is, and this is for everyone, it's almost for the world, is that what this lockdown has done is sort of remind us of the humanity in all of us. I mean, if you think about work, like we're in this routine of work that we've been in for over a century, that same sense of I need to get up in the morning, commute, go to workplace, do my work, come home, rinse and repeat. And we've built our whole lives around that routine. If you think about the way we live, the way we interact, shop and all that, everything is out around that routine of work. Whereas now that's changed. And, being at home and being locked down, I think it's allowed us to reconnect with who we are, with our families, readjust priorities. And I think we're all going to be better as a society going forward. I know that's sort of getting a bit warm and huggy, but I genuinely think that's the opportunity that we have to make a better place for ourselves.
I can tell you, I'm all for warm and huggy. I'm all for hugs are free at Insentra. Well, they were until now we can't see anybody, so we can't give anybody any hugs.
Virtual hugs.
So now virtual hugs are free, which is, probably not a bad thing in some regards, but it's that whole transition, it is a crazy. Do you think, though, that we've been through a peak and we've got to this new space now? How much of that do you think is going to actually be the new normal? And do you think it's actually going to start to slowly revert back where we end up back in what we were used to be doing, etc.? Do you think what's your view?
I think if the pandemic and the lockdown had only happened for a couple of weeks, then yes. We would have just gone back to normal. We would have jumped on a plane to fly to Melbourne for a 1-hour meeting, like all of us have been doing. Whereas because this has gone on for so long, we've adjusted our lives. We've adjusted the things that we do during the week and the weekends. We've adjusted the way we're working. And I think for most people, I don't think they want to go back.
Yeah.
And I think employers are recognising that. You look at how many organisations around the world are fundamentally shifting the way their work practices exist all around remote working. There was an article that just came out this week around HSBC globally saying they're going to reduce their real estate footprint by 40% because of flexible working. So you've got big companies making significant capital adjustments as a result of remote working. So I definitely think it's here to stay. what the extent is going to differ organisation to organisation. I mean, some people will be, all right, you guys can do full-time remote work, others will be hybrid. I think hybrid is going to be the model that ultimately will stay. But yeah, it's going to be different.
It's like cloud, isn't it? Where we went, everyone's going to go cloud. No, they're not. They're going to go hybrid.
Exactly.
It's exactly what happened there. And you speak about it in an Australian context. And let's be fair here. You know, our audience is global. You're all out there, and you're not just in Australia. And there are some people in 2021 that are still in significant lockdowns, stage 5 lockdowns, in fact, where this is still very, very real for them, and it is becoming actually their new normal, not even by choice, but almost by design, almost because they're being forced down that path. And so from a Citrix perspective, obviously being the remote work leaders, you've been doing remote work forever. And now you've had this big spike in people who are working remotely, which is, as we all know, has driven an enormous amount of business for you. That's well and good, but what are you guys seeing as the next? So here you are as the CTO, you're the visionary part of Citrix, you're the future state. What are you seeing as the next thing while I add the raspberries into here, and then while you're talking, I might actually even try to get you to fill some of these. You don't have to, you can just share your intelligence if you like.
No, look, I think it's very interesting. I mean, I think when the pandemic first happened, everyone had to quickly mobilise and come up with some sort of solution. You need to put something together, be it virtual desktops or VPN or whatever it was. They put that solution out there, and that was tick. Because this is going to become more formalised and a part of the future, now what they're doing is going back to those solutions and saying, one, what do I need to fix up? What are the shortcuts I took? Maybe there's gaps in security or visibility or optimization. What can I do to make the technology better? And then the second part of that is, how do I actually create a richer employee experience as part of that? So not just looking at the technology or the apps or the devices that they're using, but what actually are they doing from a business process perspective, from a workflow perspective, and how can we improve that? How can we make that more efficient? How do we accelerate the digitization of those work processes just to make things more efficient? And that's where we're seeing more and more organizations starting to focus. I've ticked the technology box. I've sorted out and optimized the base technology platform. Now let's look at the way you work and how we can make your lives more efficient. And that's where we're seeing more and more focus go into workflow, automation, business process, digitization, and things like that.
Yeah, look at me, I'm making it all
there
easy
you go,
here.
thank you.
I just just giving you an example so that you can do the rest if you like. Or do you want me to keep
No,
going?
I'll have a turn.
I'll tell you what, let's do half time, swap sides.
There you go.
There we go. So when you talk about automation and the way people work, etc., what are some of the things? You know, Citrix has recently acquired an organisation. Is that right?
Yeah, we acquired a company called Reich, who are in the work management space. And that space is really about how do we take all that noise out of email? I mean, if you think about at the moment, the way you find out where a project is at or where a task is at is you probably email someone or email a bunch of people because you're not sure who the right person is. So that email goes forwarded and emailed again, reply all, and you get a whole bunch of noise. Multiply that by how many people are in your organization, and people are distracted heavily by email and chat and Slack and all the other channels of communication that exist. And what Reich and work management solutions are trying to do is get rid of that noise. It really takes away from your work. You're constantly being interrupted by a ping for a message or a chat or a Teams message. So work management is really about taking all those tasks that you have and putting into...
Just a second, how many of you out there suffer this ill? The ping in Teams, the ping on Slack, the email that comes in with a bit of toast that pops up. And you know, even before all of these new work management solutions, there's all these how to be more efficient at work. Turn off the toast, turn off your email, close the thing. So what I want to know, and I'm sure what all of you out there want to know, is how does a solution like Reich and like what Citrix is going to do take that away? Does it mean that we all now just look at one set of pings, or?
Well, I think that's what would be great, right? If you had one place to go for all of those things. Right? I think the reality is the way we interact with people across or within your organization and outside means that you typically end up having to use different platforms. But if what we can do as a first step is just reduce the volume. Email is not going to go away anytime soon. Teams or Slack is not going to go away. But if we can at least reduce the volume, so Ronnie, if you need to find out the status of a project, you can go to a place and you can get all the information you need, who's working on it, all the updates you need to make your decision, all without having to bug people through email or messages.
I hear you. but the cynic in me says intranet.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, I mean, I think it's just the evolution of the intranet. I mean, if you think about the intranet from a decade or two ago, be it SharePoint or a typical website, I mean, it was there to host content with some workflow. I think nowadays the way intranets or that type of workflow platforms work, it's a lot richer. There's a lot of collaboration. There's integration with back-end system of records. There's automation of business process and workflows. So I think it's expanded in scope to not just being a siloed place to get information, but it's a place that now, as more of a platform that is hooking into your business systems and can actually start automating some of the business processes that need to happen.
Okay, so does that mean to say then that from a Citrix standpoint, it's not just about the remote work and being able to work outside of the office, but it's also the how you work?
That's right. So I would say there's two key elements there. One is, from a Citrix perspective, we have our infrastructure solutions, which are all focused on delivering services out to the end user, which are focused on optimizing and securing all those services. So all those infrastructure things about how do I get the services, the applications, the content that people need to do their jobs to them securely.
So that's like the Zen apps and
the virtual desktops, the ADCs, the SD-WANs, the digital workspace and all that. Now there's another element which is about how we work, exactly what you said, which is more focused on productivity. How do I go beyond just providing access to an app, but now go to looking at why are you using all those apps? And what's all this extra noise that you've got? What are the workflows that you're trying to do? And how do we improve that? And I think in this world of remote work, that's even more important because people are isolated. They don't have their peers next to them where they can say, hey Ronnie, how do I do this? And
probably you wouldn't know the answer anyway.
No, that's right. Or the IT help desk, right? So, in that isolated fashion, we want them to be able to feel like they've got the space to succeed. They've got all the tools that they need to work in now a much more distributed fashion. And it's not going to happen overnight. Companies are going to have to evolve their business processes, the systems that they use. But that's, I guess, the journey that we're on from a Citrix perspective.
Okay.
We can help you initially get the services to the end user and get them working as we've done. And now we can help you make your employees more productive and more efficient and feeling like they're in more control of their daily workloads.
And do you think that as a consequence of the Reich acquisition, that Citrix is now going to be positioning itself well for the future state of work? So, remote work is there to stay. That's pretty much a given. In some capacity, it's a lot more than what it was. It's not just for people on holidays or for people who are just going home in the evenings, etc. It's now, that's just what they do. So it's relevant, it's there. The next stage now in terms of becoming more efficient, becoming more effective, how do you think you then take that offering and get the end users to know how to use it?
Yeah, and I think that's where there's been a huge focus from. I think that
Look at you've done a great job here. We've still got some there. Some of these are a bit light on here,
top it up.
I reckon you can put a bit more in, buddy.
I think what's been really good is from an IT industry perspective, we've all seen a significant increase in the focus on employee experience and customer experience and really focusing on the experience of the technology rather than just getting the tech out there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what us people in IT are all guilty of, right? Historically, it's we make the decisions, we decide what we think is best for the end users, we deploy it, throw it over the fence, and then we wonder why they complain because we haven't taken the time to actually understand what their needs are. And that's
can I just stop you at that point? Right? A big chunk of what we do is all about end user experience. Right? And making sure that, particularly in virtualized environments with Citrix, that the end user experience is fantastic. Because, let's call it out for what it is. Anytime there's a performance issue and someone's using Citrix, Citrix is to blame. The reality is it's not Citrix that's to blame. It's because Citrix isn't necessarily implemented correctly, it's not on the right infrastructure, it hasn't been scaled, it hasn't been managed, it hasn't been, all of those things, right? So end user experience for us has been very much at the top of what we have been considering.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about the experience of the end user, I still question, how do you define good? So how do you know that it's getting better? How do you implement a scenario like this and make it better?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, if you don't measure it, how do you know?
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing is that shift where more and more organisations are starting to look at techniques like design thinking. Design thinking is
I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah,
you tell me more about this. I just want to get these into the oven.
No, that's right.
Look at this great sort of setup for us to go and sit and eat these. I want to get them in the oven and I want to start eating.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
But design thinking is really about focusing on the person that's actually going to be using the service. I mean, how many times do IT find a requirement from the business, they actually haven't spoken to the people, the end users who are actually going to be using the application or service.
That's the BA's job, isn't it?
Well, I think that's where it all needs to come together. I mean, IT, I don't believe can work in isolation anymore. When you think about employee experience, we're talking about not just the tools that they use, but the physical environment that they work in, the culture and process side of things. So there's a number of different elements that need to come into it.
Yeah, but the physical environment's now radically different.
Because
it could be somebody in rural area, it could be somebody in the office.
But I'd say that an employer still has the responsibility to help the employee be set up for success.
Yep.
Just because they're working from home, we can't forget about the employees. Oh, they've got a laptop, they're all good. We've got to make sure that they've got the right tools and they've got an ergonomic chair, for example, right? Where they're sitting behind the same desk 8 hours back-to-back meetings and they're not getting strained and back injuries and that. So even though an employee is not in the physical office, as an employer or as a leader, you still have a responsibility 100%. Over their welfare and well-being. So I think it's broader than that. I think the design thinking and techniques like that are about taking the time to understand who you're building the solution for. Not IT, but the people that are going to be using it and starting with that.
Wouldn't that be novel for IT to actually think about what does the end user really want, what's going to make them great. I'm going to take a pause here.
Put it in there.
I'm going to get these into the oven, Safi, so that we can then sit down shortly.
Absolutely.
So we'll get these in. We'll allow them to work. I might talk to my trusty friend Google and put on a timer for Google. How long do we need to cook these things for? Let's have a look in our recipe here. 25 minutes. I don't never trust our oven. Hey Google, set timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, starting now.
There we go. Safi, mate, I tell you, they look fantastic.
They smell awesome.
It must have been the way that you spooned them in. There is no doubt in my mind that that's what made those look great. And what I'd love to do with you right now is I'd love to come and sit down, have a cup of tea. I have my head of vibe here with us, and vibe for us is sort of our people.
Got it.
Our people and culture. So I've got my head of vibe, I've got our vibe manager, and I'd love to have a conversation with you and let them ask you some questions because you seriously have some great ideas in this space.
Yeah, sure. We'd love to do that.
Let's have a cup of tea.
Let's go.